Lot to talk about. Joining us this morning to discuss it, William Taylor, former U.S. Ambassador to Ukraine and Vice President of Europe and Russia at the U.S. Institute of Peace. Sir, always good to have you on the program. Thank you. Did President Biden say anything during his speech in Poland that you believe will persuade Vladimir Putin to change course?
What will convince Vladimir Putin to change course is the realization that he can't win on the battlefield. The realization that he cannot win in the end, and what President Biden said in Warsaw and what he demonstrated in Kyiv is that the United States, and by extension the NATO alliance, is there for as long as it takes for Ukraine to win. So I think that was the message to President Putin. He's going to have to eventually acknowledge that he can't win, that he's losing on the battlefield.
And what if he doesn't? I mean, he hasn't so far.
Then it'll grind on until his troops on the battlefield are just defeated. If his troops on the battlefield crumble, if they crack under the pressure of the renewed attacks by the Ukrainians, bolstered by the weapons that the United States and the rest of NATO are giving the Ukrainians, if the Russian military cracks, President Putin will have a choice. He will not have a choice. That's what it's going to take, Marni.
But his choice may be China. I mean, factor that into the equation.
So the Chinese are in a very interesting position. You're right. It'd be very interesting to know what that diplomat talked about with President Putin. The Chinese have said very clearly to Mr. Putin, stop this irresponsible talk about the use of nuclear weapons. The Chinese have denied Russian requests to help the Russians get around sanctions. The Chinese have not voted with the Russians in the Security Council or in the General Assembly, United Nations General Assembly. So the Chinese have not provided support. They're not supportive of violating territorial integrity of nations. The Chinese support territorial integrity, as long as they've got some caveats on that, but they are not pleased with this invasion of Ukraine. You know, Marni, the Chinese were the single largest investor in Ukraine before the war. This is a problem actually for the United States, but nonetheless, the Chinese had big investments in Ukraine, so they're not pleased with the developments.
But what about the reports that China, according to Antony Blinken, may supply Russia with lethal weapons?
You know, that's a concern, and the Chinese know it's a concern. The Chinese know it's a concern that we will put sanctions on them, on those firms, those Chinese government-owned firms, or the Chinese government, if they do provide weapons to the Russians. And the Chinese have to decide, is it worth giving up our commerce, our trade with the two biggest markets, that is Europe and the United States? Is it worth giving up commerce, trade with our two biggest markets in order to give the Russians weapons? The Russians who didn't even tell us that they were about to invade when they had the opportunity. No, I think the Chinese have some serious thinking to do before they provide those weapons to the Russians.
And do you think that China would be talking to Russia if the U.S. hadn't shot down that spy balloon in recent weeks? Did that amp up the temperature?
Probably amped up the temperature, no doubt. But I think they'd have been talking anyway. I don't think this visit was in response to the balloon issue, no.
Okay, so F-16s is something that Ukraine has asked for. You didn't hear Biden commit to providing Ukraine with that type of weaponry. The other concern is long-range missiles. Ukraine says we need them. Can you paint a picture of why those would be held back? I mean, obviously the concern is you send a long-range missile and it crosses the border. We got a much different situation, right?
I'm not sure it's a much different situation, actually. The Ukrainians want these weapons in order to defend themselves against the Russian invasion. That's clear. They want these weapons in order to push the Russians out of their country. That's clear. That's what they want to do. The Ukrainians want to push. That's their goal. That's the end goal that they want. They want the Russians out of their country. And they need the weapons to do that. So far, we've been providing the weapons a little slowly, a little too slowly for my own preference, but nonetheless, the United States and NATO have provided these weapons finally.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.